Stand by please, electric sound, wardrobe, wig, stage management, stage crew, flyers and all technical departments.
Welcome to Leave the Ghost Light On.
Hello and welcome to Leave the Ghost Light On. My name is Jill and with me is the amazing Danica. Danica, how are you doing today?
I'm great. I do want to call out. I don't know if you forgot.
You're not Danica. Everybody, this is my cousin Eddie. Say hi, Eddie.
Hi everyone. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you for coming on. Danica is in Prague right now and is unable to record an extra episode that we need in order to keep our Mondays going as far as, release dates. So we had to improvise and we're going to have our first guest now.
Yeah.
So
I'm excited to be here. I appreciate, Jill, your candor and honesty, because you could have said, "Man, we have Eddie here because he's great," not because we were desperate.
I didn't even realize that. That's true. No, we're not desperate. I knew as soon as we started a podcast, I wanted to bring you on as a guest host at some point. So,
You're too kind.
mhm. Yeah. Well, Eddie,
Yeah.
introduce yourself.
Okay. Yeah, my name's Eddie. I'm Jill's cousin, so we've known each other for a hot minute. Maybe grew up
Just
together
a
a little
casual 30 years.
bit. Yeah. Just some ballparking, yeah, around
Yeah.
there. Yeah, I live in Nashville. I am a crisis comms uh, professional specialist expert. I was about to say expert. That's not true.
Oh, I'm sure you are. You can call
That's what
yourself an expert. You can boost yourself up a little bit.
I'll say that. I'll just say that's what I get paid to do, and then I'll
There you
let
go.
others decide how they want
Mhm.
to classify me.
Nice.
Yeah, I am a big fan of theater. I've done it for a
Mhm.
long time. I am
Yeah.
also a big fan of ghosts.
Mhm.
I've also just been into those for a while too. So I was
Nice.
really excited to get the invite to be here.
Yeah, of course. You wanna do your own podcast at some point, right?
I do not anything as cool as talking about theater
Oh,
and
thank you.
ghosts. But yeah, we'll see. I've got
Mhm.
been writing in the background, looking at doing something in fiction. So we'll see if that
Mhm.
ever comes to fruition. Also been sitting on it for like 2 years, so
Yeah.
maybe another two before we make any progress on it. So
No, there's no time like the present. Plus, then you can have me on. So,
yeah, that's true.
we'll just swap every so often, and then at one point, I'll just be yours, and you can just take over my spot
Yeah,
and hang out with Danica. It'll be great.
just do a full rebrand. Ghosts with Danica and Eddie.
Exactly. You're gonna have to take the pictures with her, though.
Yeah,
So,
that'll be the season 3 reboot.
ooh, perfect. Okay, can you tell me a little bit? Because I kind of know, but, like, tell me a little bit about, like, your background with theater and everything.
Yeah, I started out very young. I wanna say I was 5 or 6 when I did a summer theater program in Memphis,
Mhm.
where we, did lots of fun things that 5 and 6-year-olds do, like make masks and arts and crafts, but it was all theater related,
Nice.
leading up to a performance at the end of the year where I got up on stage and played a tiger, I believe.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
and I think it was to Old MacDonald Had a Farm, and I had my tiger mask on that I'd spent weeks making, and I got up and I said, "And a rawr rawr here," like a
Oh.
tiger does.
Mhm.
And so I think that's where the spark for theater really lit.
With a
That
roar.
fire with the rawr, with the second rawr, I felt the fire begin to bloom
There
in my passion for theater. No, so
Nice.
I no, I did enjoy it, and so
Mhm.
I was in several shows growing up.
Mhm.
Also did some like acting and modeling on the side
Mhm.
until I got to college, and then in college I did a couple shows, but I haven't
Mhm.
actually done a show since college, so I don't want to like
Mhm.
immediately ruin or ruin my reputation or my credibility in being here by saying I haven't done a show in 7 years. But I will say the last show I did was the Twilight Zone at Union, the school I went to here in Tennessee, where I played Rod Serling. So I hope that being on my resume maybe adds a little bit of credence to my my spooky knowledge
There you go.
that I have.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Then,
Get into the Twilight Zone. I think I sing the Twilight Zone theme on one of the episodes at some point. So
oh, nice.
yeah, that's really Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Nice. I was gonna say what a thing to end your theater career on, but you don't have to end it. I guess you can always pick it back up again if you want.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen you in a show. Have I? I was trying to think.
I don't think so. The only thing the only thing that maybe would have happened would have been like if my mom had convinced like all of the extended family to come to Jackson to see, like, because I did improv there for a few years as well, and I know for a fact that didn't happen, but that was like that would have been the one that you probably would have seen. But
yeah, I don't think so. I think the only thing I've seen, I'm guessing it was Joey who is in James and the Giant Peach.
Yeah, that's the third.
That's the one. Joey is Eddie's brother, so younger brother.
Brother.
I remember. Huh?
I was going to say yes, younger brother who is I think surpassed me in terms of theater experience and credibility at this point.
Oh yeah, he's super into it, so he's right in the middle of it. Oh man, well, nice. That's fun. What do you have going on this week? Anything exciting?
No, which is ironic given I guess the day we're recording this on. I don't know what day this is going out, but it's the week of the 4th of July. And normally we would have again going back to the family connection. We would go back to Memphis where our shared extended family normally does a huge blowout picnic.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Good job at remembering that's July 4th because I don't have that day off, so I don't ever remember about holidays. But yeah, that's right. The Memphis gigantic barbecue with all 200 of our family members.
99% of whom you either don't recognize or even if you like vaguely recognize, you have no hope of remembering their names.
Yep.
and that's
somehow
okay.
Your mom knows every single one of their names.
Yep.
So.
And they'll inevitably come by, of course, and say, "Oh my goodness, you've grown up. You're so old."
Yep.
Where does the time go? Every possible sentimental cliche that can be said will be said while you're trying to fill your face with barbecue.
Oh yes, yeah. Because I'm assuming they still do it. But so for 4th of July for our family, they used to. I mean, I think they still do, but they barbecue like an entire gigantic pig. And it's like overnight, like slow barbecued and everything. So because I remember as a kid going up there like the night before with my dad and being like, I want to see the pig and all that kind of stuff. And in reality, I think it was just a bunch of old guys sitting around a fire pit, probably drinking. I don't know.
Usually
just sitting around in lawn chairs, and then me and my dad would just show up and stare at the pig for 10 minutes and then go home.
Yep.
And come back the next day for an extremely hot and humid day of barbecue and family members and no fireworks. So
growing up, it always felt, I don't know if you felt this way, it always felt like a unique 4th of July experience. And I don't know why, if that was just some sort of individualism on my part. Like I needed to feel like it was unique, that that our family did this and maybe not every other family did this. But like looking back, if you boil it down, it is a bunch of people for a picnic. There's barbecue and chips and sides and there's potato salad that's broiling under the sun. There's a group of kids who you don't recognize, who you'll never speak to, who always go to the pond nearby and shoot off firecrackers.
Oh yeah, that's right.
All looking back at it, it feels that is a quintessential 4th of July experience.
Are you ready for a little story time?
I am very ready and very excited.
Okay, well, so I am going to be the one who goes first because we're sticking to our normal routine of tragedies versus ghost stories. Um, I was trying to decide what I was gonna do for this because I was like, I don't want to pick like a normal traditional theater and like throw all the theater lingo at you since I know you've been out of the game for just a little bit. And like whatnot. So I'm kind of happy with the one that I landed on. So
Cool.
hopefully, I feel like because you're a dude, you probably should know a little bit about this since it's like a meme that's going around or a saying or whatever that every guy is thinking about it at least twice a day or something.
Wait, is this? I was gonna say, does this have something to do with Rome?
Yeah. It sure does.
Okay.
We're talking about the Roman Empire. No, I'm kidding. But yes, it does have to do with Rome. And so I'm gonna hop into it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna travel back 2,000 years, which at this point will be the oldest theater that we've covered so far. We're going back 1,937 years to be exact, and we're going to the Colosseum in Rome. So
That is a big one.
yeah, that is a big one. So, okay, to start out, the Colosseum began with Nero, Claudius, Caesar, August, Germanicus. What a name. We're just going to call him Nero from now on.
That
So,
works.
so Nero was the emperor around the 660 AD, 64 AD. Some fun facts about him. So he liked to make public appearances as an actor, a poet, a musician, and a charioteer, a charioteer.
Charioteer?
Yeah, somebody who drives a chariot.
A chariot guy.
Mhm. Which was pretty not normal for emperors to do.
Mm.
Most sources describe Nero as tyrannical, self-indulgent, and debauched. So he's not one of the good emperors in history, if there are that many good ones. So many Romans believed that he started the Great Fire in Rome in order to clear land so that he could build himself a gigantic villa. And then my last fun fact, this is not as fun. So Nero was declared a public enemy and was condemned to death, and he ended up fleeing Rome in 68 AD and committed suicide.
Wow. Okay.
So that was the end of him. I guess he was like, I'm going to take things into my own hands. So, but anyway, so to back it up a little bit, so the Great Fire of Rome burned for 9 days in 64 AD. Can you guess how much of Rome burned down, a percentage?
Oh my gosh, 9 days.
Mhm.
Here's where I'm already running into something here, which is and this is just me being bad at history. My perception of Rome in that
Mhm.
era is that it's just all stone. It's just
Yeah.
all brick and whatever form of brick they had back then. It's stone. So I'm
Yeah.
like, what's burning for 9
I'm guessing it's all the stuff that's like thatching it together. I mean, stone
I guess, yeah.
burns.
Again, but that's me clearly not
Mhm.
knowing my history or
No, you're
basic.
fine. If you would ask me that question, I'd be like, Okay, can you guess a percentage? Just throw one out there.
I'm gonna guess 40%.
71%.
71?
Yes, 71% of Rome burned down. That's why it's called the Great Fire. So,
Doesn't sound that great.
no, it doesn't sound that great. So again, many Romans believe that Nero, despite the fact that he wasn't there, potentially started the fire in order to make a newly cleared plot of land for his Domus Aurea, aka his golden house, or aka Nero Villa, in 64 AD, only a couple months after the fire. So, and this is still the building's not there anymore, but you can see this in Rome. It's still like a big,
Huh.
like open villa-esque area, or not villa, but like a big garden, essentially. So
That's baffling.
I know, right?
Like if that's true, as far as like him being the one to start it for that reason.
I know. It seems like maybe people just really didn't like him, but anyway, so this big, gigantic, fancy villa that he has was completed with a 98-foot tall bronze statue of himself called Colossus of Nero. I'm like, what a guy. So fun fact, after his death, that statue actually remained around. I can't remember if it's still there. I don't think it is. But it remained, but they continued to just change out the head on the statue to look more like whatever emperor was in
Yeah,
power.
that's amazing.
I
Yeah.
thought that was funny that they were like, this thing is ridiculous. And then they were like, all right, I guess we'll keep it. We'll just chop the head off every so often. So Nero died in 68 AD, and Vespasian took over and founded the Flavian dynasty. So he was the next emperor. And under him, they tore down Nero's lovely villa and started to build the Flavian amphitheater, aka the Colosseum. So construction started in 72 AD and ended up being completed by Vespasian's son Titus in 80 AD. They built it using limestone, volcanic rock, and concrete. So, and I've heard something that like the way that the Romans made concrete, like we are not able to recreate that or something. I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but apparently it was like an absolute like insane like concrete that was just super duper duper strong, and we don't know how to make it these days. So
That's cool.
Yeah. So a little bit of a description for the Colosseum. So the Colosseum is a freestanding structure as opposed to like most of the structures of the time, which were built into the side of hills and mountains. It is 615 feet long and 513 feet wide. So the Colosseum is 3 times as wide as an American football field and almost twice as long. This thing is huge.
Yeah.
So, it was 157 feet tall, which is about normal for like a stadium nowadays. The walls are covered in statues honoring deities from classical mythology, and every column and pillar has a decorative element and scroll work. This is another random question. Can you guess how many exits it has for patrons?
Exits. Oh man. I feel like it's either going to be like 1 or it's going to be like 500. Like
Okay, like in the middle.
Okay. Well,
Not 500.
250 then?
76. 76 exits,
Okay.
4 of which were only allowed to be used by the emperor himself. So in total, the Colosseum is about 6 acres. And the center, aka the stage of it, is 287 feet long and 180 feet wide. The floor was wood that was covered by sand. So I actually didn't know that. The Emperor Domitian later created the tunnels under the Colosseum, which would house the slaves and the animals, and so that's kind of the iconic look when you see the Colosseum nowadays, and you can see all like the rows and rows and rows of places where they kept the things that didn't want to stay there. So that word is a hypogeum. Do you know what that word means?
I don't actually.
It means underground.
Okay, cool.
They were really creative. So it's called the hypogeum. So all throughout the floor, there was elevators and pulleys that would raise and lower scenery and props, as well as lifting cages of animals to the surface. And there was evidence for major hydraulic mechanisms. There are 80 vertical shafts that provided instant access to the arena for caged animals and scenery pieces. And then there were larger moving platforms called hegmatas that were for elephants because they had elephants. I'm almost done with the specs. The walls of the arena were about 15 feet high, with rollers on the top to stop animals from being able to jump into the audience.
Mm.
It was possible for them to.
I'm glad they were so safety first. At the
They actually really were. They really cared about their audience members. So, but yeah, they were able to flood the arena rapidly using the aqueduct. However, after they constructed the hypogeum, that put an end to the flooding.
Mm.
And then there were 36 trapdoors. So those are the specs. It was quite a spectacle. Most of those things don't exist anymore, but we can still kind of see them a little bit. I'm going to keep asking you questions. How many people do you think could fit in the Colosseum?
Oh man. 20,000.
65,000 spectators.
That's insane.
Yeah. So I think it said that it could hold about 80,000 spectators, but 65 was the average and the norm for every day.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a couple of other fun facts. So tickets were given to spectators via a broken piece of clay with their row and seat number on it. Tickets were free, but women and slaves were given the worst seats. So
sure.
and then so the events that took place at the Colosseum were all-day events. And so apparently if you go there are actually carvings in seats from people who would come and just sit in the exact same spots and would just sit there and carve like stuff into the stone all day long. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So now we're going to get into, I guess, technically what kind of makes this place a bit of a tragedy.
Okay.
Which are there's not necessarily one particular thing that has happened here. It just wasn't, it wasn't a great place. So we're going to talk about the games that were held there. And so Colosseum had games running there for about 350 years. So Dio Cassis, which is a historian and a senator, noted that over 9,000 wild animals were killed in the arena on the first day in the inaugural games in 81 AD. The inaugural games killed 9,000 animals. So
how many animals per minute is like that? Has to be absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah. I think I said I'll give this fun fact a little bit later, but
Okay.
there's some specs on it.
Okay.
Just a little bit, just some fun
teaser for later. Yeah.
Yeah. So the that's not even the biggest one, sorry. The events that were held there were sometimes at an absolutely massive scale. So Trajan, who was another emperor in 100 AD, was said that he celebrated his victories in 107 AD with contests that involved 11,000 animals and 10,000 gladiators over the course of 123 days. Just long lasting.
Yeah.
All right, so an example of some of the games. The first one, which is going to be the most well-known one, is the gladiatorial. So the gladiatorial was a sport and was also a spectacle. And I feel like most people probably know what gladiatorial is, but it was essentially where gladiators who were adorned in armor and weapons and all that kind of stuff basically fight each other.
Yeah.
So, however, though, most people think that it's like super duper duper brutal, and it wasn't necessarily. They were actually highly trained and went to school to be gladiators, and everything was planned and very organized. The purpose was not for them to actually die, and in fact, dying was extremely expensive because then it meant that you had to replace them. However, gladiators did have to learn the correct way to die if they ever come to that. So they had to gracefully die without showing fear. So bravery until the end was what was important, and that's what the spectators wanted to see. They had to die with honor.
Huh.
I'm going to take a mini sidestep and talk about the movie Gladiator.
Oh, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I was like, I can't talk about this without talking about Gladiator, and this is the spot where it makes the most sense for it to be interjected. So some of the things that in Gladiator are not necessarily completely factual,
Mm,
but they kind of got some of it right. So there wasn't literally a gladiator named Maximus, which is the main guy. Um, but the story is more of a combination of a bunch of gladiators
mm.
and then just in general, like telling about gladiator history. So, which for anybody who hasn't seen Gladiator, it's a movie about a gladiator. No I'm kidding. I can't remember what it is. It's like an officer turned to a slave turned to a gladiator, something like that.
So we'll spend the next 20 minutes here. So, just kidding.
Oh yeah, you ready to deep dive into the movie Gladiator?
No, it's been so long. I would worry about angering someone if I said something wrong about the movie Gladiator. Well, because I think he was a general. I think
General, that's
they
what it was.
won a war.
Mm-hmm.
The emperor at the times
Mhm.
told Russell Crowe and said, "Hey, my son and heir is
Told Russell Crowe, not
told Russell
Maximus.
Crowe,
Russell Crowe.
Russelius Croesus, I think
Perfect.
would have been his name at the time, said,
Mhm.
my son is a doofus, but he's my heir. But actually, I want you to take over because you're good at what you do and people respect you."
Yeah.
But before that became news, the emperor dies, of course.
Mhm.
The son knew that was the emperor's plan, but said, whatever.
Mhm.
And
Get out of here, Papa.
I believe he has Russell Crowe's wife and child killed,
Mhm.
and then like I think he tries to kill Russell Crowe, but then he escapes and then
Yeah.
comes back as like a slave.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, he gets captured gets captured and then is
mhm.
made into a slave.
Yep.
Mhm.
But it's interesting to hear you talk about like it being more of a spectacle or like
Mhm.
almost it sounds more like a performance than it
Yes.
does
Mhm.
a death match,
Mhm.
which is interesting because like outside of Gladiator, like in pop culture generally, like those games are portrayed as like brutal death matches, even when it's not like Colosseum centric, like oh
Mhm.
gosh, like Thor Ragnarok, for instance,
Oh, yeah.
has like that whole idea in it.
Mhm.
So I didn't know that. It's cool to hear.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and also in general, like with that movie, like it obviously has a lot of death in it, but
mhm.
also you don't really see them as actual gladiators until like towards the end. So, because in the
Mhm.
movie, they're all slaves. And that did happen where they would have the gladiators come out and kill all the slaves in horrible, horrible ways and stuff like that. But as far as like the actual gladiators dying, like they didn't want that as
Yeah,
much.
that
So,
makes sense.
yeah. Um, well, a couple more things about Gladiator.
Yes.
So the emperor that you were talking about is Marcus Aurelius, which is one of the most famous emperors that we know about. And in the movie, it said that he banned gladiators, but he actually didn't. He just didn't enjoy violence and didn't want to see any of them die, and so he gave them all dulled weapons so that they would never
Huh.
kill each other. um, so Marcus Aurelius ruled from I didn't write when he ruled, but he ruled until 180 AD, and
Mm.
then that's when his son Commodus, the little bitch, took over. I don't know how to say it. And in the movie, Commodus, spoiler alert, Commodus kills his dad, but in reality, Marcus Aurelius just died of a disease or old age, and him and Commodus actually ruled together for 3 years. And then when he died, he took over.
Mm.
So Marcus Aurelius was the last of the 5 good emperors of Rome, and his death marked the end of a period of internal tranquility and good government. Commodus
Was
it
a
is
doofus.
yeah, was a doofus, and it said that his reign was a complete and utter failure.
Mm.
So, Commodus completely debased Roman currency and destabilized the Roman economy, and he caused political upheaval that would lead Rome into a civil war. So,
That's pretty bad.
yeah, he did not do good. So anyway, so that's just some fun facts about the movie Gladiator and some real bits about it. Okay, so again, just to recover, we just talked about gladiators. The next type of game that they did was called Venatio, which is animal hunts, which I don't like. So this included creatures such as rhinos, hippos, elephants, giraffes, lions, panthers, leopards, bears, tigers, crocodiles, and ostriches. Ostriches. That was so funny. Essentially, the animal hunt was where they would have battles, and hunts were essentially staged with elaborate sets and movable trees and buildings. And it's exactly what it sounded like, where they would hunt these animals and kill them.
Mm.
So, the other thing was ad bestias, which is execution via a wild animal. Where essentially if you were charged to be executed, they would just let a wild animal do it. And this was typically during intermission or lunch. Because that's what you want to see when you're having your lunch, is somebody getting torn apart by a lion. So
Real appetizing.
Another type of game was Namakia. I think that's what it is, Namakia, which is the naval battles. And so this is what I was talking about before, where essentially they could fill the entire arena with water from the aqueduct and reenact famous sea battles.
Huh.
So they had like actual like ships like sailing around and all that kind of stuff. But once they put in all the stuff below the Colosseum, that went away with. So, and then the last bit is Silva, which is the recreation of natural scenes. So painters and technicians and architects would basically construct the simulation of a forest with real trees and bushes planted in the arena floor, and then animals would be introduced, and it would basically make a natural environment for an urban population to see, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to see that kind of stuff. And this was typically the backdrop for hunts, and then also dramas depicting episodes from mythology.
Ooh, interesting.
Wow. So that's all the things that happen. So basically all the games are surrounded by death. So
Sure.
So a couple of not so fun facts again are it is an estimated that over 1 million animals were killed in the Colosseum. This is where I was saying the Colosseum is responsible for eradicating certain species of animals in nearby regions. And then it is estimated that between 500,000 and 1 million people were killed. And so that was the stat I was going to say, where they said for the 350 years, essentially 1,000 people were killed every year for 350 years.
Yeah.
So
That's pretty rough.
Yeah, so again, this is like a tragedy, but not literally anything in particular was tragic. Just the entire existence of this place was kind of tragic.
the whole ecosystem of the Colosseum was a bloody one.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to kind of blast through some history to get us 2,000 years into the future.
Okay.
So in 2017 AD, a fire caused by lightning destroyed the upper levels, which were wood. In 443 AD, there was an earthquake that destroyed a lot of the infrastructure. Gladiators were around until 435 AD. Animal hunts were around until 523 AD. And then in the 16th century, the Colosseum became a cemetery. And then in the 12th century, it was housing and working shops. In the 14th century, it was completely abandoned and was a den for bandits. And then in 1349, there was an earthquake, and that's what gives us what the Colosseum looks like now, where it's like kind of like that half of it's missing. That was the 1349 earthquake. So this is one of my favorite ones. Pope Sixtus V wanted to turn the building into a wool factory to provide employment for Rome's prostitutes. But his proposal fell through with his premature death. I just like always like, get these prostitutes out of here. It's time for you guys to go make some wool. Like what? A couple more things. In 1679, another cardinal wanted the Colosseum to be used for bullfights, but the public was like, absolutely not, and so they did away with that.
Yeah.
And so, for the most part, the Colosseum was basically abandoned. Not abandoned, but just wasn't actually used for anything other than potentially like religious-esque use.
Mhm.
So the facade was reinforced with triangular brick wedges, which you can still see in 1807 and 1827. And then the interior was repaired in 1831, 1846, and the 1930s. And then the last thing is the effects of pollution and just general deterioration prompted a major restoration in 1993 and 2000. So I didn't know that they're still working on it, but they are. The exterior of the Colosseum is actually the original interior wall as well.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So that's all the fun history of the Colosseum, and there's a lot more. But we only have a little bit of time.
Yeah.
But now we're gonna get on to a little bit of fun stuff, which is the ghosts that are there. Because naturally, if 500,000 people die there, there's gonna be some ghosts.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah. So just as some examples, it says countless staff and visitors and passerbyers have reported paranormal experiences and apparitions. One of the most frequently seen apparitions is that of a Roman soldier. The lone guard is seen at night when the landmark is closed, and he has been seen peering inside and just hanging out and still guarding. I thought this was interesting. Apparently, there has been multiple sightings of a full crowd of apparitions in the stadium bleachers cheering.
That's
Like multiple
amazing.
people have seen that multiple times over the time of like over history. It's like that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
That would be terrifying though, just like seeing a whole like a couple hundred ghosts all at once. No, thank you. So a lot of people claim to hear noises, screaming, shouting. They have been described as moans and screams from past prisoners and slaves. And so most of the stuff you hear is not happy sounds. In addition to the human sounds of anguish, there has also been people who report hearing animals in pain. So, one Reddit user that I found described the feeling of an animal rubbing up against her legs and following her all around the Colosseum before vanishing after letting out an anguished cry.
That whole description was so like stray cat coded to me.
Yeah, it's a stray cat. There are actually cats all over the Colosseum. There's like a whole cat colony there right now. So
Listen, I hate to call it. I think this one is debunked.
it was just a stray cat, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I'm almost done. I've got two more examples of some ghosts. So one of the most famous ghosts is Nero's ghost in the form of a flock of crows. So Nero, as I said before, committed suicide in 68 AD after learning that he had been declared an enemy of Rome and condemned to death. His burial took place at Pinetian Hill, overlooking Piazza del Popolo. That was my attempt. Popolo. So according to legend, after his death, Nero's spirit inhabited a flock of crows and has been seen roosting in the walnut tree near his grave. The Romans were so convinced of Nero's presence and the crows were said to feast on the flesh of people with demons and witches. I don't know. That in the 11th century, the Pope ordered the tree to be cut down and the chapel of Santa Maria del Popolo built in its place. So they were like, no. And then the last one is... So then the last one is Messalina, which is the Emperor Claudius's young wife who was notorious for her promiscuity and serial adultery. So According to an ancient Roman poet, she would often work as a prostitute in a brothel just for funsies. And so, Claudius, for the most part, overlooked his wife being this way,
Mhm.
but eventually couldn't ignore it any longer when she tried to marry a senator in order to dethrone him. And so he ordered a messenger to kill her
Mm.
and to spare her from public shaming and execution for treason. So they say that her ghost can now be seen walking around the Colosseum in search of a lover. Um, and some say that she occasionally wanders over to the Piazza Nirvana and pinches the bottoms of young, handsome men.
Oh my gosh. Oh
And that
man.
is the story of the Colosseum.
That's that's wild. I
Yeah, 2,000 years of history in 30 minutes.
it's yeah, I'm still shocked by some of those stats you shared earlier as far as just
Mhm.
how bloody that
Yeah.
whole history is, which kind of makes you wonder why, like, it's not being used right now for much, right? Outside
No,
of
it's just
just
a tourist place.
yeah.
So, like,
Um,
you can't have concerts in there or anything. I think they thought that they were going to at one point, but it's just
mhm.
too destabilized. They can't have that many people
Yeah. I
for a
also feel like,
concert.
and this is, I can't, I'm going to discredit myself immediately by not having any actual examples of this, but I feel like places like that that have such prolonged
Mhm.
bad bloody histories usually don't recover from that. They
Yeah.
usually kind of inhabit this weird in between space where they're always just never fully being used for something, always
Mhm.
just kind of like
Yeah.
just a transient sort of
Yeah.
um, non place almost.
Well,
Um,
and that's kind of what it did. I mean, essentially, after the gladiators left, like, it just was kind of like, "What do we do with this thing?" And so,
yeah.
for, 1,000, 1,500 years, essentially, they were like, "I don't wanna
Well,
tear it down."
it was really good for games, but I just don't feel like we should be doing that
Don't think
anymore.
we should be killing people anymore. So, yeah, I think I read somewhere that, whatever that, like, the center of the arena, whatever that would be called, like,
Mm,
is the, like, most, like, deadly plot of land in the world.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
that makes
more
sense.
people have died in that little section than anywhere else. So,
Yeah.
mhm,
Um, yeah, no, that's wild.
mhm,
I my it's funny, my only for some reason, when I think about the Colosseum right now or I picture it,
mhm.
the image I have is of, from the recent Godzilla and Kong film
Where he falls asleep in
where he
it.
falls Godzilla just takes a full nap inside the
I
Colosseum.
I haven't seen that movie, but that is the one that I see all the time, where it's just him just, like, curling up inside the Colosseum.
There I'm gonna take a quick 30-second aside to talk
Mhm.
about this movie because I'm obsessed with it,
Yes, please.
and you can cut it. But I went and saw it a couple months ago, and
Mhm,
it's just like they have really, since the last movie,
mhm.
really leaned into the campiness of the
Oh, really?
franchise in a
Like, they're
really
just
fun
going for it
way.
now?
Yeah. Well, because if you go back and if you watch the Godzilla movie that came out, I think like 2014,
Mhm,
2013, sometime around there, they did the thing that everyone was doing in the early 2010s, which is we're
mhm.
going to take this existing property and we're going to make it gritty,
Yeah.
and we're going to make it grounded and realistic. And so there's a lot of it's a very moody atmosphere for the first couple
Mhm,
of movies. But if you watch them, like as it moves forward and the turning point being Godzilla versus Kong, they
mhm.
just sort of realize this is kind of dumb and we're gonna start acknowledging that. We're gonna
We're
stop
just gonna
trying.
go for it, yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna fully go for it, because this is a giant lizard fighting a giant monkey.
Oh
And
my
to
gosh.
it, my favorite thing about this most recent movies, there's just so many moments of that are just like memeable. As,
Mhm.
as much as I hate that word, like
No, it's true.
there's Godzilla laying in the Coliseum.
Mhm.
There's my favorite thing, which is King Kong meets this kid version, like kid monkey, who's still like huge. Um, but and he's like oh my gosh, one of my kind. I need
Mhm.
to greet this monkey and
Mhm.
become friends with it. So he like reaches out a hand and like offers like as a saying, "I am a friend. I mean you no harm" or whatever.
Mhm.
Baby monkey attacks him right away,
Oh.
and then 2 or 3 more King Kong sized apes jump in. It was like a trap basically for him.
Oh.
And in response to this, King Kong grabs the baby monkey by like the leg and uses it to bludgeon the other
Oh my god.
3,
Like,
just
it just
starts swinging and just wailing on these other apes. And it's the dumbest thing ever put to
Oh my
film, and it's so good for that
Mhm.
reason.
I
Um,
I feel like that's, like, what Fast and Furious did. Like, I feel like Fast and
mhm,
Furious tried to be serious, and then at some point they were like, we're done."
yep.
So, in the most recent one, because I watched that one, in the most recent one, they literally take a car to space.
I think I remember
Like
seeing that,
like
yeah.
Tyrese and what's his face, the other guy, like, they literally go to space in a car.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like,
That's one series I've never watched, but wanna
yeah.
get into because it follows that same trajectory, I think, of, like,
Mm,
grounded, realistic.
yep,
We want this taken seriously, and
yep.
then they jump the shark in terms of action to
Jump the
absurdity,
shark! That's a good phrase. Mhm.
and then a couple movies later, they have to reckon with that absurdity. It's like, "Alright, we
Mhm.
either keep pretending it's not absurd,
Yeah.
or we just lean super hard into it."
Yep.
And I appreciate when they lean into it. I think there's a little bit of that too in the Mission Impossible movies. I don't know if you've
Oh,
seen
for
those.
sure.
Um, sorry, this was a complete tangent, but
No,
I
you're
got
fine.
excited thinking about Godzilla and
No,
Kong.
you're
So
fine. You're fine.
so I do have a question for you as we get into this that doesn't actually relate to my thing per se, but it's just kind of a broad table setting question that I
Okay.
thought of while you were talking about ghosts, which is um, if you were to die today, just tragically and horrifically,
Oh my god. Oh, okay. Where are we going
what
with this?
what kind of ghost do you think you would be? And I'll while you ponder that, I'll kind of list some of the options we have, right?
Okay.
So we have poltergeist, right? Which is like your
Mhm.
spooky, aggressive, malicious, sort of very interactive presence, right? It's the
Mhm.
ones you see like throwing things across the room, knocking over
Yeah.
lamps, putting static on the TV. Um, there's also like there are friendlier versions of that where you can just kind of be a helpful ghost if you want. Think
Mhm.
of like a maybe like a Casper sort of vibe.
Oh, yeah.
If you've ever seen that movie,
Casper, your friendly neighborhood ghost.
yeah, um, you could be one of my favorites, which is an orb.
Mhm.
When you go into like a haunted house and take photos or whatever, and there's just
Yeah, it's
the
got the
orb.
orbs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can be a funnel ghost, which if I remember
What is
correctly,
that?
I'm pretty sure that's just the name for when it's like a cold spot. Like when you just like manifest as
Ew.
like you're walking through a haunted area and you get a
Okay.
sudden chill, or you walk through a spot and it's like weirdly cold.
Okay.
That's the funnel ghost. Or you could be what, and this is the reason that sparked the question is you talked about Nero manifesting as a flock of
Oh, it's
crows,
crows. Mhm.
which I'd never heard of before, and I was just fascinated by. Um,
Mhm.
or you could be something more again, looking more to like if you're a bad ghost,
Mhm.
malevolent sort of ghost, like you do the whole like banshee thing, right, where you just
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
go around screeching into windows on the moors, um,
I
just
mean,
late
that
into the
one
night.
sounds pretty great.
um, but yeah, do you have any thoughts, any feelings on the type of ghost you'd like to be?
I mean, okay, so I always like the idea of being poltergeisty just because screw it.
Yeah.
But me and Danica talked about it at one point, and, I think it was in the Belasco Theater or something. She mentioned that there's a ghost that will help people set their props.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but I think it would be really fun to be a ghost in a Broadway house and just either help people set their props or mess their props up. So,
Hey, it might change depending on the day and your mood.
that is true, and who it is, yeah, but yeah, I would probably be a Casper or a Poltergeisty.
Okay, that's awesome.
Mhm.
I I don't know. I just think it's funny, but I would probably say an orb.
Yeah.
Just like just like cross across someone's field of vision just out of nowhere and then vanish
And then just be
like
like,
a shooting
"Ah,
star.
there you go. Oh,
Um,
you're a shooting star."
well, except I'd probably be like this big and like
Mhm.
for those listening, I held my hands up and I realized that it's not helpful in an audio format to try to do some visual gags.
The ball
Uh,
was like the size of a
it's like a softball size,
softball. There
right?
you
That
go.
feels right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry, that was my one aside that I was again thinking of because
Mhm.
a ghost that is just a flock of crows is
I know.
very metal,
I was like, that one sounds pretty cool.
very cool to think
Mhm.
about. Let me. All right. So I am talking today. I wanted to bring something from that, like, I don't have a direct tie to this theater, but I did want to bring something from Tennessee, which is where I grew up and
Nice.
where, again, I live in Nashville now, but today I'm talking about the Bijou Theater in Knoxville.
Ooh. Okay.
So I learned, I was aware of the theater. I had kind of a vague sense of it and some of the history of it.
Mhm.
Again, just from growing up in Tennessee and being involved in theater some, but had no idea how intense the history of this place was. So
Okay.
it is actually believed to be the oldest active like commercial property in Knoxville,
Oh,
and arguably in the entire state.
wow.
So it has been around for 200 years, which is crazy. It
Yeah.
has taken a lot of different forms in those 2 centuries, but basically it started out. This guy named Thomas Humes purchased a lot in Knoxville, which was still a developing area at the time, back in
Mhm.
1801. Um, didn't do anything with it
Okay.
really for the next 14 years. And then in 1815 decided, hey, I want to make this into a hotel, into a tavern, and into like 3 different storefronts. So it was like this one
Oh,
building that was just kind of going to fulfill all these different purposes.
nice.
And so this was like passion project, got really excited about it, got really into it. Um, Died in 1816 before it was
I was
open.
waiting for that. I was
Yeah.
like, passion project. Something's gonna go
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah. This man's, dream to open up this hotel tavern, these
Mhm.
storefronts, died a full year before it was open.
Mm,
Um,
poor
so
guy.
if you want to talk about kind of setting up the vibes for this place, the owner dying before it actually opens is a heck of a way to kick
Yeah.
that off.
His dream place. Oh.
Um, heck of a way to kick that off. So eventually it did open.
Mhm.
It held what was called the Knoxville Hotel. And then again, those 3 additional storefronts and a tavern. And very quickly, it became, I couldn't tell how much of this was the intention at the
Mhm.
outset, just based on researching, but very quickly became like a luxury spot in
Mhm.
Knoxville to the point where, one of the first like big events was a ball or dance or something hosted
Mhm.
by Andrew Jackson
Oh.
in 1819. So just a couple of years after it had opened, it was
Mhm.
already established as like this, like, oh, if you're someone
Mhm.
and you want to do something in Knoxville or in this part of the state, like this is the place you go.
Huh.
Is the Knoxville Hotel. So it, in spite of that, in spite of its popularity, in spite of its growing reputation, it actually changed hands a lot over
Hmm.
the first 30 or so years and changed names a lot.
Okay.
Um, Again, because of the Andrew Jackson Association, for a while it was called the Jackson Hotel.
Mhm.
It was called the City Hotel, Coleman House. Basically, whenever it changed hands, it sort of just adopted the name of whoever the new owner
Of
was,
whoever owned it.
which normally would be bad for a brand if your if your
Yeah,
name
you're
was
just
changing.
constantly naming it, but
Yeah, if your name was
we
changing
don't
every
have the
5 years.
internet, it's fine.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, exactly. Um, if your name was changing every 5 years, you would assume it'd be bad for business. But
Yeah.
again, by all accounts, it did really well, and its reputation was just stellar during this period. Um, and so the changing hands sort of settled in 1852 when a guy named William W.M. Churchwell purchased the
Mhm.
hotel. And again, because of the popularity of it, decided to just heavily invest in it. So he made a bunch of renovations. I think at the end of his changes, it was double the previous size. Added like
Nice.
an elevator, a new kitchen, parlors, dining
Mhm.
room, a courtyard, stables. Just really like
This place
Again,
is bougie.
bougie as all get out.
Yeah.
And it was already bougie, but he just like, no, like we're gonna ratchet this up. We're gonna take this to the next level.
Yeah.
In 1857, it was purchased by a Colonel William H. Sneed, who owned some
Neat.
additional property. Yeah, Sneed. Yeah, I chuckled at that name.
I was like, what a name.
Yeah, often. It just reminds me. Have you ever seen the Lorax?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because wasn't the product in that the Thneed?
I think so. I think that's why I'm like,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
yeah, that's my association with it. So it was
Yeah.
it was pretty funny. Yeah, he owned some adjacent property, and he ended up leasing. Again, even though he owned the property, he ended up leasing it out. So it again continued to change hands as far as like who was operating it, who was running it. And I think at this point it had taken on the name the Lamar House, which is how it was
Okay.
known
Yeah.
more broadly for a while. So that continued to just kind of be the epicenter of Knoxville, particularly its like social scene. This was still the spot to go to
Yeah.
for any highfalutin affairs that you wanted to happen in town.
Highfalutin affairs.
Highfalutin affairs. So Sneed held onto the property for 12 years and then died. I couldn't actually find how he died. A couple of the sources I was reading characterized it as quote unquote unclear circumstances, and I think even the Bijou Theater's website characterizes it as unclear circumstances, which makes me think there's like more. Either there's more to the story there, or like we
there's
just
nothing.
genuinely don't know, or there's nothing.
Yeah.
But I couldn't find anything. So
I'm like, that sounds like there's way more to the story.
yeah, that's where my head goes.
Mhm.
It certainly adds to the aura of the place, I think. That said, it did, instead of passing to someone entirely new, the property was kind of passed around between family members over the next several years. Again, going back to the consistent theme of this place can't hold down an owner. I think between 1869 and 1881, it was owned by 7 different people.
Wow.
Again, I think most of those within the Sneed family. But again, during that time, it continued its habit of changing names. So it was called the Lamar House for a bit. It was called the White House for a time. Then the new Lamar House, which I guess was someone tried to frame as a reboot. And then finally it settled for a while in 1904 to quote the Old Homestead,
Okay.
which is a nice little name.
Yeah.
We're moving on from Sneed, but keep that name in mind for now,
because I like Sneed. Yeah.
we will be returning to Sneed.
Okay.
So in 1908, it was purchased again, renovated it, transformed. This is where we move from this being a ballroom to a theater, as as the main sort of gathering place. So it was named at that point Jake Wells's Bijou Theater. Now the original like surrounding building around the theater continued to function as a hotel, and as a store and as a tavern. But the theater began to be the primary attraction there. In fact, to the point where it opened, when it opened in 1909, it was fully sold out crowd for a production of, this might be testing your, I guess, old theater knowledge.
Yeah.
Do you have any guesses? Do you have any guesses as to what the show might have been?
Ragtime.
No.
I don't know. I have no idea what it would be.
It was Little Johnny Jones.
How was I supposed to know that? I've never heard of it.
So you've not heard of Little Johnny Jones. I hadn't either. What you will have heard of is what I hope is the Yankee Doodle Boy, the song.
Oh,
and Give My Regards to Broadway.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Both of which originated with that show, which I did not know. It's a very patriotic show, very sort of aggressively American, a lot of slams and disses against the British over the course of the show.
Nice.
It's about a jockey who goes to an American jockey who goes to England to ride his horse. The horse's name is Yankee Doodle. In the English Derby. yeah, interesting show. I watched or I listened to snippets of it.
Oh, you did.
I was curious because
Yeah.
I knew those two songs. I was familiar with
Mhm.
them, but familiar with them as like a piece of like just kind of American culture that we've all just sort of universally absorbed, like the happy birthday song. Like
Yeah.
I don't know where that came from, but like I know it. Everyone
But we
knows
know
it.
it. Yeah, everybody knows it. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it was interesting to find out that was a show
Yeah.
that's what that originated from. Um, so I believe the last run was in the 1980s,
Huh.
and produced by the Light Opera of Manhattan.
Mhm.
Apparently, it was a success. Not enough of a success, I think, to have seen another revival since the 80s, but
It's too patriotic for us now.
evidently
Mhm.
was well received. Do you have? Okay, this is my other. I'll leave Little Johnny Jones after this.
Okay.
Do you have any guesses as to? And I'm gonna sprinkle in some hints before I prompt
Mhm.
you to answer as to
Okay.
who might have been the lead at one of. There are actually a couple of revivals in the 80s, but one of the
Okay.
revivals featured a well-known singer and actor from the 80s, theatrical singer and actor, I'll say, um, who comes from a well-known musical family who
Elvis.
no. This would have
No,
been
he'd been dead by now.
this would have been 1982. Um, and I'll
Should I know this name?
you will know this name.
Oh gosh.
I will also say that um, famous parents, famous
Mhm.
siblings. Um, I'm trying to think of other like hints that I can give that wouldn't.
I feel
Um,
like I'm so bad at this stuff because, like, I just don't know musicians very well,
no,
especially,
that's
like,
fair.
people from the '80s, and, like, as far as, like, theater goes, like, maybe if you say it, I'll be like, "Oh, yeah," but, like, in general, I'm like, "Oh, I don't know any theatrical singers from the '80s."
Yeah, that's fair. I'm trying to think of one more. Okay. Well, my big hint would be, do you know who sang um, in Mulan, "I'll Make a Man Out of You"?
No, I don't know.
Okay. That was my last.
Oh, no, I
Um,
don't know the name. Who is it?
that was it was Donny Osmond.
Oh, I
Who
would never
played
guess that.
yeah. No, he he sang "I'll Make a Man Out of You." I don't think he actually played
Mm.
Lee in that movie.
No. I
Um,
don't think any of them did. I think, that's how mostly Disney would do it, is they would have one person voice them and then a different person sing.
mhm.
And so
Yeah, that sounds right.
mhm.
Yeah, sorry, that was my little Johnny Jones aside. Um, anyways, back to Bijou Theater. Back to the main story. So, notably, the theater opened. It was a success. It became primarily a vaudeville
Mhm.
site from the early 1910s up to the late 1920s. Occasionally, they would show motion pictures as well,
Nice.
which was pretty neat. Um, from the very beginning, Bijou Theater had allowed black patrons to
Mm,
attend as well, which was
mhm.
unique for the time.
Yeah.
It was one of the very few theaters in the area that did so.
Yeah, that's
Um,
the
prior.
Ryman that I did, a while back. The Ryman did that too.
Oh,
So
nice. Yeah,
mhm, yeah, they were, like, supposed to segregate and all that kinda stuff, and they didn't. So, you would think in the South,
yeah,
but
yeah.
no.
That's why I think it's notable. Is it is so much more
Mhm.
of a rarity. I think in the
Yeah.
South.
Oh, yeah.
Um, in 1926, another theater was constructed on the same street. The owners of that theater purchased Bijou, but later sold it to someone else local,
Mhm.
um, with the stipulation that the theater could not be used for theatrical productions for 5 years.
What?
Yeah, well, because they
Why?
didn't the Tennessee Theater, which is the new one that opened
Mhm.
uh, around that time. it just didn't want the competition.
Oh,
So they had initially the move was, we'll just buy this, right? And so then we have a monopoly on any theatrical productions that are happening in this
Yeah.
part of town. And then when they decided to sell it, they were like, well, all right, we'll sell it, but guess what? We still want to be the only
ones.
the only ones in town doing this.
Oh man.
So that kind of put a damper on things.
Mhm.
It basically, after that, became a used car lot for a few years.
What?
The entrance to the theater, so like the box office,
Mhm.
became a fruit stand. And
Fruit stand. Out of all the things that you could have said, that's not what I was gonna
I know
get.
I've a little bit spoiled my question upcoming. The spark notes of the next piece is that the theater, because it couldn't be a theater, became a lot of different things over the next several
Okay.
years. Restaurants, fruit stands, used car lots.
Mhm.
There was and we'll come back to a couple of these, but there was two things that also surprised me. At one point, it became an adult film house for a short period of time.
Yep. We found that a lot of places on Broadway did that too.
Yeah,
Yep.
that must I guess when the theater itself suffered for some reason or another, that was probably an easy sort of
Yeah.
way to operate.
Yeah.
And also for a short time, related, a brothel. So that was also,
Come see your adult films and your adult ladies.
yeah. So just
Oh.
again, it just kind of lost its identity following the Tennessee theater sale
Mhm.
for several years until 1935. Paramount Pictures stepped in, took a 30-year lease on it, made it a movie house. Great,
Nice.
fantastic. Eventually, when that was up, the whole area sort of declined, and that was part of when it sort of drifted into brothel territory, but also just was known as just kind of a hotbed of criminal
Yeah.
activity.
Oh.
Yeah. So in 1969, it was declared a public health hazard and was closed.
Oh no.
Well, the hotel specifically. The theater
Oh, okay.
still operated, but again,
The
it was,
theater was like, "We're fine. No one's
yeah,
here
we're fine.
anyway."
This is chill.
Yeah.
In 1971, it went to a church. And
Mhm.
then in 1975, the theater itself was finally closed due to
Oh.
unpaid rent and amusement taxes.
Oh.
And it was scheduled for demolition.
Mhm.
Thankfully, it was added to it was registered as a national historical landmark.
Mhm.
And so that came to a head because
Mhm.
the group who was trying to stop the demolition did not have the extra $50,000 they needed basically to keep it from closing.
Uh-huh.
Finally, a benefactor, John S. Goodstein, stepped in
Mhm.
and donated the remainder of that 50 grand to keep it
Nice.
from being demolished. So
Nice.
over the next 30 years or so, it was just sort of a kind of ongoing restorations,
Mhm.
very intermittent, very start and stop, most of which were not full or final in any way until
Mhm.
in 2005, Mayor Bill Haslam
Mhm.
announced a whole plan and rolled out a plan to like restore it and make sure that it stayed like as a landmark. And so in 2006, the doors were opened again, and they've operated since,
Oh,
which has been
nice.
cool.
So it's
It's
an
hosted.
operating theater.
Yeah, it is. It is operating. It's active. It's cool too, like because when you look at like the names that are performed there, because it just really, um, like you have people like the Marx Brothers
Yeah.
performed, but then also like Dave Matthews Band.
Oh, fun.
So it's like it's a cool like
Mhm.
the scope of just in terms of time frame and eras of entertainers
Mhm.
and performers who have had the chance to perform there is very cool.
Yeah.
Because you've obviously got Dolly Parton, you've got the Ramones.
Oh, yeah. It's like Dolly has to have been there.
So it's just very cool, like that. In spite of, again, chronic ownership changes, chronic identity issues, right?
Yeah.
That it has somehow survived all of that and kind of continued on, because there were
Yeah.
several points it shouldn't have been, including one that I haven't mentioned yet because
Okay.
it's part of the ghost period, which we're about to get into.
Yay.
So I told you to remember the name Sneed.
Yes.
So during the Sneed era, as we'll call it,
The Sneed era. Oh man.
the Sneed era, again, a guy named William Sneed bought the property, leased it out to a bunch of tenants for a while, and then he died, and so it kind of got passed around the family for a while. Yeah. Okay. So we have the Sneed family who controls the property, which again encompasses the hotel, the theater, and then the 3 storefronts. And now I don't know if this is one of those things that was kind of hard to pin down, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell whether this is an embellishment or not to the story. There was a young man named Thomas Atkins who, and this is the part that I can't tell is embellished, may or may not, either him or his family may or may not have owned the second most popular hotel in town.
Okay.
That again, from the reporting that I saw, treated it as if that were fact, but I couldn't find historical documentation, and it felt enough like the sort of it felt enough like an embellishment, because of course this is
Of course, it's the second most
second
popular,
most,
whatever
right?
it is. Yeah.
Because it sets the stage for what happens to Thomas Atkins.
Okay.
One night he has been drinking. He is
As you do.
inebriated, and he's feeling very thirsty. So he decides, he's in the part of town where the Lamar House, as it's currently known, is, and he stumbles in. He's like, "Hey, I need a drink. I need some water. I'm thirsty. I've had a busy night."
A drinking
of
and
drinking.
debauchery.
And I don't want to be hungover in the morning. I just need I need some hydration.
Yeah. I need some electrolytes.
So again, as you can imagine, if the story about the Atkins family owning the other popular hotel in town is true, there's tension between the two families. Didn't stop him from stumbling into his rival's hotel, but here we are nonetheless.
True.
Allegedly no one would serve him, right? Whether that's because of the rivalry, or because, again, maybe it was because the story is that it was at around 3 a.m. that this happened.
Okay.
So maybe it was just because of the late hour. Maybe it was the rivalry.
They're like, get out of here,
they
man.
didn't want to serve him. Not only that, Thomas Sneed. So yes, they're both named Thomas, which is a little confusing. Thomas Sneed, member of the Sneed family, is there, and decides to give Atkins a hard time, because Atkins was asking for water, and Thomas and Sneed allegedly said, "What do you want water for when you can have a man's drink?"
Oh no.
I don't know if I put enough inflection on it. Let me try that. What do you want water for when you can have a man's drink?
Oh, there you go. That was good. That was great.
That's how I imagine it happened, and what Sneed sounded like, which is funny because also the reports indicate that Sneed was not a large man.
Just a little guy. Like
Sneed's a little guy. They start tussling, roughhousing. And Sneed, who was smaller, allegedly then shouted, "Atkins has a knife. He is threatening me with a knife. I was just having fun, and now this man has brought a knife into the equation.
I was just having fun. We're just tussling.
we're just boys being boys, you know.
We're just boys being boys. Yeah.
So Sneed says this, and then in response to himself saying this, pulls back his jacket dramatically, revealing that he has a gun, a pistol.
Ooh, okay.
In his pocket. Atkins is agitated by this, grabs Sneed, right, by the jacket, starts manhandling him. and Sneed goes tumbling to the floor after
Mhm.
Atkins shoves him. Sneed then pulls out his pistol and shoots Atkins just right in front of everyone.
Jeez.
There's no, again,
Like, I've had enough of this.
it's 3 a.m. There's no indication of how many people are actually here. Again, at the
Yeah.
time, this was functioning as a tavern, so it's like it's reasonable to think there could have been
Yeah, there could have been
a
some.
number of people there.
Yeah.
I don't think it was a huge crowd by any means, but
Mhm.
each of the accounts makes a point of saying like that he did this just in front of everyone,
In front of everyone. Damn it,
which
Sneed,
is
I liked you.
no, Sneed is fine. Sneed is the one who pulls the trigger.
That's what I'm saying. You
Yeah,
shot somebody.
Okay. Well, then you may not like hearing that he, by all accounts, also got away with it, claiming
Okay. Well,
self-defense.
that's fine, I guess.
Which
I
is,
don't know.
again, details are fuzzy. So, like, sure,
Mhm.
maybe that's true. So they, to this day, right?
Mhm.
If you allegedly, if you were in the Bijou Theater or the bistro, which is what now occupies kind of the space of the restaurant,
Mhm.
um, you might hear footsteps.
Okay.
You might hear murmurs.
Ooh, murmurs.
You might get the sense that someone else is there.
Okay.
And I love this. What you are supposed to do is just set out some water. That's all
He
you're
just
supposed to do.
wants some
He
water.
the man never got his water.
Man never got his man water.
The man died thirsty.
Aw.
So yeah, and there's multiple reports of this from
Mhm.
employees and visitors who have claimed to have, again, the footsteps kind of stepping or shuffling is kind of the biggest thing.
Okay.
And that's yeah. So more than 140 years after
Mhm.
Atkins' death, he reportedly still haunts the place.
Nice.
The one other fun fact that I liked out of this is that both Atkins and Sneed are buried just feet apart from each other in the same cemetery.
I wonder how
Um,
Sneed feels about that. Well,
Probably
I guess
not
he
great.
died. Well, no, I guess, yeah, I don't know. I was gonna say he died afterwards, so he probably chose where he was gonna be buried, but maybe not. I don't know if you do that.
Or maybe his family chose, or
Mhm.
again, I don't know how. It was a large-ish area for the time, and
Yeah.
but I don't know how many cemeteries they had. All right, one other ghost story, and this is
Mhm.
the one thing that I glossed over in the history of the theater,
Mhm.
and the hotel was during the Civil War. The
Oh.
the control over Knoxville kind of went back and forth.
Mhm.
Um, so at one point, the Lamar House, again as it was known at the time, now the Bijou Theater, was
Mhm.
occupied by Confederate officers,
Yeah.
and then Union soldiers came in and took it over, and it served as, again, just to add to the list of fruit
Mhm.
stand, brothel, adult film house, theater,
Mhm.
hotel. It also served as a hospital
And a
during.
hospital. Why not throw it in there?
Well,
And
that is the
everything
bottom.
else.
Yeah. So during while the Union was occupying the area, this was like the hospital
Mhm.
for the city, and so they, to the point where, like, again, it was a very integral part of the community,
Mhm.
to the point where, like, the Union generals who were stationed there also just used the hotel as like their headquarters too.
Okay.
And so, like, all their their battle plans and war councils and all those meetings all took place like in the Lamar House, which was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Um, Now, one of the generals there, William P. Sanders, was shot while in the Lamar House
Mhm.
by a Confederate sharpshooter.
Ooh.
So again, it was very like, when we talk about, like, think about, again, we were talking about the Colosseum earlier and like
Mhm.
how it just has such like a bloody history. Like, this
Yeah.
was like a notably kind of bloody history for, like,
Mhm.
moment of history for this place.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just that, like, yes, the Union was occupying it and it was using it as like a field hospital, but it was still very
Mhm.
much like an active place of conflict. Like, there was a lot
Yeah.
of death that happened
Yeah. Yeah.
in this place.
Especially when it's a hospital. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. During this period, just a lot of death, a lot of blood.
Mhm.
And one of those deaths was General William P. Sanders, who was
Mhm.
shot by a sharpshooter and later died in the bridal suite. Um, Yeah.
Okay. Oh no.
Yeah, he died November 19th, 1863.
Mhm.
His ghost reportedly haunts the theater to this day.
Mhm.
Several people have claimed to have seen him out of the corner of their eyes, or
Mhm.
as one employee I saw reported,
Is he in a white wedding dress?
he is not. So he, one article I was reading about this has a statement from one of the employees there who says, a couple weeks ago, I came up here by myself. All the lights were off. No big deal. I turned them all on except for the men's bathroom light. I got the women's bathroom cleaned and went over to the men's, and there was a man standing there in a uniform with gold buttons coming down it.
Ooh.
It was so solid, there was a gleam on the buttons. I saw him
Ooh.
and ran, which I think is appropriate.
Oh yeah, no, for once, finally somebody was like, no thank you.
This is the
I'm out of
correct
here.
response.
Mhm.
But yeah,
It's the only response.
same with Atkins. There have been several accounts from employees and visitors to the
Mhm.
theater of seeing a man in uniform with gold buttons.
Mhm.
Um, Interestingly, a lot of these sightings happen around the bathrooms. It's
Is
again,
it
this
'cause
is
they've
like
got water in them?
water. Yeah, yeah, just Atkins, just thirsty as all get out.
Oh, he's like,
Um,
"I'm gonna get my water one way or another."
I Yeah, and one of the reports I read said, like, indicated this place is like one of the most haunted places in Tennessee in general,
Hmm,
but
nice.
specifically the bathroom area
Hmm.
is the most haunted area of this very haunted area. To the point where there, in addition to Atkins and in addition
Mhm.
to Sanders, there's also been reports of the spirit of a small child,
Ooh,
um, and other spirits. Again, presumably people who died, likely when it was a Civil War hospital,
yeah.
just kind of roaming the hallways. But specifically the child spirit is also said to haunt the area
Mhm.
near the women's bathroom.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, but again, lots of reports, lots of people claiming they have seen it, or
Yeah.
heard footsteps, seen gold buttons, or
Oh,
up
man.
to the point of people have said they've felt people tug on their clothing.
Oh, I hate those.
Yeah, that
That's when I'm like, "Don't touch me."
that's probably my least favorite of the
Mhm.
stories.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a pretty haunted area. I think there
Mhm.
there was a um oh my gosh, I lost the name of the show, Ghost Adventures or Ghost Hunters.
Yeah.
One of those shows also like named this hotel and theater like the most one of like top 10 or something most haunted places in the US.
Oh, nice.
So
When
a lot of history, a lot of cool
yeah.
things. But again, the history of the place is just fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And again, just the fact that it's still around and is
Mhm.
used now is crazy to me. So
Yeah. I always like that. It seems like it's fun to find the theaters that are, like, still up and running and are just like, "Yeah, we're still here, and that's just so and so over there. Don't pay attention to him.
don't worry about him. He's
Give him some
fine.
water, he'll be fine." It's like having a
Um,
dog.
yeah, exactly.
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
but
Let's all
yeah,
have a nice big old family trip and go to this theater.
to the Bijou Theater. I wouldn't hate that. I've been wanting
Mhm.
to go visit some more haunted places.
Mhm.
And I feel like Tennessee's got a good number of them. So
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said, you're right by the Ryman. You could go look at that one. That one's haunted.
yeah,
So
I've been there a few times, but I've not
oh, you have?
specifically. Yeah, I
Oh,
saw
I didn't know that.
I saw Walk the Moon there a
Oh,
few years ago.
nice.
I think I went to another show. I can't remember what.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I've never
that's
hmm,
I was just gonna say, yeah, that's the Bijou Theater. It's
nice.
kind of an interesting little spot.
Yeah,
Um,
I've never heard of it, so that's fun. I'm glad that you found a Tennessee one. So yeah, that's so cool.
yeah,
Very good story. Very good job.
thanks.
Yeah, you did good. So, did you have fun?
Oh yeah, dude, this is great. Again,
Yeah.
I I'm fascinated with ghosts. I'm a skeptic, like I think as I mentioned, but like
Mhm.
having an excuse to go read about the
Mhm.
history of this random random place that has a very cool backstory, and also
Yeah.
getting to read about ghosts.
Thank you so much for coming on. I think you did
Yeah.
a really good job.
You're being way too nice. You don't have to ask. I'll come back.
Until next time, don't forget to leave the ghost light on. Thank you for joining us. Leave the Ghost Light On was created, hosted, and edited by Danica Jackson and Jill Horn.
Musical composition created by Jay Nygaard.
Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, Spotify, and more. Since you're our first ghost. Or ghost. I keep saying that. You're our first ghost.
Maybe I am a ghost. Maybe that's the plot twist at the end of this episode.
Oh my gosh. The ghosts were right in front of us the whole time.
I mean, that's what it is. Instead of guest host, you shorten it to ghost.
Oh my gosh. I'm writing that down. I literally am going to write that down. Good job.
Thanks. I work in PR.